name is Cassie. Thanks y'all for coming out. I actually do the social media for Iconic Comics. And so I will actually let these guys introduce themselves. And then, after they get done talk about what they want to, we'll handle questions, because I know I even have questions for them. There you go. Start right here.
My name is Scott Malin. I've been an artist professionally for like 6 or 7 years at this point, and recently got hooked up with Iconic Comics for a new book, Kindred Heaven. The Kickstarter for that just ended, so we don't have our books with us today, but it's been a lot of fun, and Tim's the one making me do this. But we're just going to try and enjoy ourselves and ignore any fear of public speaking that we may have. So yeah.
I'm Bryce. I'm the writer of Kindred Heavens, also the writer of our other book, The Panty Bear, which he didn't introduce. I learned about this just yesterday, so this is news to me. I don't have a fear of public speaking, but I do like to ramble, so I'm sorry about that. I've been writing since I was 15. I've been writing with him since he was 15, and yeah, I just make comics.
I'm Timothy Lim. I'm one of the creators of Kamen America, and so if you've seen this girl on all the badges and all of the cups and whatever, this is our 6th year doing Bell County Comic Con. Not a lot of people know it, but Iconic Comics and Bell County Comic Con have a symbiotic relationship because the owners of Bell County have a financial stake in Iconic Comics as well, and so our intellectual property is on a lot of the things that you'll see here. I am mostly the artist, even though I do collaborate with my writer, Mark Pelligrini. You can see kind of this trend here. We have artist, writer going on. Over in the end, and then you have Doug. His artist is downstairs selling $1 kitties, so always make sure to stop by the booth and check it out, because it's quite adorable, and it's one of the cheapest souvenirs that you can have here at the show.
My name is Mark Pelligrini. I'm the writer and co-creator of Kamen America. Tim pretty much introduced everything that I could possibly say, so I won't take long. Just Carly, this little guy you've been seeing, his name is Badger, the capybara. He's also in Kamen America. And then this guy over here is a grenadier badger. Oh, yeah. And those two guys over there, that's USAGI from our other book, Black Ops, which is a commando military book. And then that's Kappa Kapu, who is a fictional mascot from within the Kamen America and Black Ops universe. Just so you know, all these friendly faces staring.
There are also, some of them are like Badger and, sorry, social media, but the Badger and the Captain, they're actually for sale. Yep. And that opens up and Badger actually fits inside. I've done it.
He could ride in the ramen cup like
yeah.
It unzips on the top. Yeah. But we have these at the booth, at the Iconic Comics booth, if you wanted to get lopsided there. You can talk.
Cool. My name is Douglas Ernst. I'm the writer and creator of Soulfinder, which is my series on combat veteran exorcists that take on this demon called Black Fire until the end of time with their detective buddy. And I've been blessed to be able to work with Tim and Mark. Tim actually did the art on the first book. Matt Weldon, who's downstairs with the kitties, he's done the inside artwork since then. And then Dave Dorman's actually been kind enough to do some covers for us as well. So Dave's downstairs as well. You might want to check out his booth.
We're going to give you all a brief history of Iconic Comics and kind of set the stage for any questions that you might have. So the main topic for the panel, I think, is creating a universe. And I think even more so than that is kind of how you even get started. Because I know that typically when we do this panel every year, there's a lot of young artists, and you have your own hopes and dreams and ideas of what you want to do for your comic series. It's not easy. That's one thing I can tell you, but it is doable, especially if you have the wherewithal and the imagination to do it. Iconic Comics started because all of us individually had certain things that we wanted to do, and we had certain stories to tell. But there's always strength in numbers as far as being able to kind of pull your resources together and work on different things. So as these gentlemen have introduced themselves, they obviously have their own titles, but we all operate under one umbrella, which is Iconic Comics. We're able to get together, share ideas, see how we can kind of bounce ideas off of each other. Like, for example, I've known Scott for 3 years, even before I knew of his work, because I saw his art on social media, and I saw, like, hey, I think this guy might be open for commissions. And so he was doing some art for Kamen America 3 years before he even decided to even consider joining Iconic Comics. If you've been going to Bell County Comic Con and you pass by the highway and see the billboards, you've seen his art for 3 years. And so it's kind of funny that here we are 3 years later and he's joined us. And so we all operate with independent properties that sometimes coincide with each other. We've had team-ups with Douglas Ernst's book, and don't know about Kindred Heaven. So Hell always has to work, but their book takes place in like an alternate past. And because ours takes place in alternate present, and we have certain rules like no time travel, it's gonna make it kind of hard for our two properties to kind of tessellate and get together. But if there's a will, there's a way, and we can kind of think of ways of doing it. So the main topic for today is, I guess, how we construct our individual universes and the rules that we set in them, kind of the pitfalls and difficulties of having to navigate them. At any time, like I said, I think we're gonna have an FAQ at the end, but if you have a question, just feel free to raise your hand and interrupt us, because that's what we're here for. We've had a busy morning and we've had a lot of interruptions that are good, because we like seeing everyone coming by and saying hello, and especially people who know our work from online. But that's what we're here for this panel. So I'm gonna leave it with Scott and Bryce here for a few minutes and let them talk about not only the work they've done with the Panty Bear, but also give you kind of an idea or a taste of Kindred Heavens and kind of how they work as a cohesive whole to construct the universe that they have and the stories that they want to tell. So I'll let Scott and Bryce kind of talk over for a little bit.
Thank you, Tim. Adding on to what he said, the cool thing about Iconic is that everybody gets to learn from each other's mistakes. I mean, we're all like independent, we're all doing this, and so like, we were fortunate enough that the campaign for Kindred Heavens actually passed the first campaign for Kamen America, which I like to quote to Tim about. Don't rub it in. but I mean, part of the reason that happened is because we got to not make the same mistakes he made. We got his advice and the advice of the team there. So that's the good thing about it, and the why we can all stick together and hopefully make stuff that people really enjoy, stuff that people really like. Which is really, I mean, that's what it's all about. Like ever since, we were 15, we started doing this, like it was all about just making the stuff that we loved. Like, we didn't want to make something just to make it, right? It was like, well, we really love comics. Like we really have stories that we want to tell, and for us it always goes back to the story. And so to be able to do that now for a living is like super awesome. And it's, large part of it's thanks to Tim and everybody at Iconic. And Doug's my friend over there.
And you can tell everyone, you do this as full-time.
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
And that's before he joined Iconic just about 2 or 3 months ago. They both did. In fact, I don't think they mind me saying this, but even Bryce over here even moved down to join Scott over in Kentucky because he knew that if they're going to get into this partnership, it would obviously be more beneficial for them to be very close together in terms of proximity. And I said, that's really interesting, because when we started working in merchandising, which was 10 years ago, Mark moved down from Virginia to my home state of Arkansas, because he, in his mind, also thought, well, if we're going to start doing this and building something out of it, it would be more beneficial to be in closer physical proximity to each other.
Yeah, and that it helps a lot, and it's something that we'll talk a little bit about this as the panel goes on. But when we started out, the first thing that we really put out there that got any traction was the Panty Bear. It started out as a web comic, and it did okay. And then I started drawing like pinups of the main character Lucia, and people lost their minds over that. That was like, people love that. And that did so well, it led to some other opportunities, and that's what permitted him to be able to move down. Like, we were able to say, like, okay, this is really turning into like something that we can do, something we can manage. And this is like a job now. And we're very fortunate for that.
Especially after spending the first 7 years of my career broker, which was not fun, but it is cool that we essentially started by, like I said, we released the Panty Bear, and it had a small but very loyal fan base. Some people still to this day, it's really cool having people come up to our booth and know the Panty Bear, because we kind of always feel like it's been forgotten a little bit. Aside from the main character, it kind of became a little bit bigger than the book itself. But we were always really proud of it and always wanted to further push into comics. And Kindred Heavens we worked on for about 2 years because, as Tim said, it's historical. It's set in like an alternate 1920s and revolves around essentially a racing company that races these almost Wright brothers-esque planes and competes, and it vividly involves the daughter of the biggest wind racing company in the world that is having a fall from grace. And she is trying to keep her family's company alive while dealing with these other bigger corporations that are trying to eke them out. And a lot of it was just built through a lot of research. It took 2 years to dig it. This is book 1 that we just kickstarted. It's going to be 4 books. And it was a lot of research. I made him read a lot about planes, and he was really upset about how much he had to study about planes, especially when I'd draw the inside of this plane, and he wouldn't know what that meant because I wouldn't describe it.
I have schematics for jet engines and all sorts of stuff.
But our process, the way him and I work, is that we're a duo through and through. We started making comics when we were 15 because we liked Naruto, and that's the simple answer. We
You run like him too?
Yeah. We like Naruto, Dragon Ball Z, Bleach. We grew up with all those kind of things, and honestly, it just made us want to make comics. And so when we were 15, we didn't have anything else going for us, and so we started writing comics. And we were broke for a long time afterwards. But it all comes from a place of sort of loving that. And the way we work is we write everything together. We essentially plot and outline everything together. Our process is entirely 50-50 through and through, up until we get to scripting. So Kindred Heaven is one thing I always tell people. I like to say Scott is a writer on our books too, and it always makes people look kind of weird, but because I genuinely think, because he outlines and helps me with everything. The only part I take over is when it's putting the pages, like writing what the pages are. And then the only part he does on his own is the artwork. So we do everything 50-50, all the world building, everything is 50-50.
I want to talk about your world building real quick. Oh, did you have a question? Did someone have a question? No? Okay. So, I've read the book. Oh, Rob has a question. Okay.
So, anime has inspired you just like it inspired Tim and Mark?
Oh yeah, for sure. That's anime and manga and Western stuff. I mean, I think you can tell by even my artwork. It's like a lot of Eastern stuff, but also a lot of Western stuff. And so he mentioned one of the big ones early on was Naruto. We were like, man, that's cool. We want to write a 1,000 chapter story. And we tried to do that as our first thing, and that didn't happen. But various things, and not even just like anime and manga, but also like live action stuff. Like actually a big inspiration. This is very strange because I don't think you can tell by reading the book, but one of the big inspirations for Kindred Heavens was like Quentin Tarantino films and like just stuff like that, because of the way the dialogue was written. We were like, that's really cool. How do we make our dialogue that good? And inspiration can come from anywhere. Like the Panty Bear, one of the big inspirations for how we composed that story was actually just like watching pro wrestling. We were this is like how you make a villain look good, and we just looked at like wrestling heels. Like, okay, why does the Undertaker look so good? Well, let's do something like that for the villain. Like, let's make them look strong so that heroes look better when they win. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, go ahead.
So with Kindred Heavens, where did that idea come from? That's what I was curious about.
Well, it started. This is a very niche mention. So there's a movie, Ford versus Ferrari, and there's one scene in the film. I thought the movie was like okay, but there's one scene in the movie where Ferrari is trying to buy Ford, and Ford doesn't sell, and or maybe it's the other way around. I can't remember at this point. And that scene was so well done that I was like, I want to do something like this. Like I want to do something like that, and that's where a lot of our stuff comes from. Is just like story. We start with the story and then we flesh it out from there. And I know, and like everybody's process is different, and you'll hear that when everybody else gets the chance to speak and we quit hogging the mic. But some people start with characters, some people start with the world. For us, it's the story, and so we build our world to serve the story itself. Like how do we make the most interesting, cohesive project, and the world is just a part of that. And so everything is shaped around the story for us in our process.
Question over here.
For a story I'm writing, I have a world built up, the characters are all quite literally fleshed out, but what do you do when you have a good world that's set, you have a lot of rules, characters are made, but you aren't sure what to do about the story, and you don't want to plagiarize another story? What do you do about that?
We're going to let the 3 writers all give an answer to this, because the answers are really neat.
So for me, I specifically, I'm bad at world building. Like actually sitting down and being like, I'm gonna plot out a world, do everything. I write the story, and what I do is I use a method that I don't remember who told it. It might be you, or it might be someone you were acquainted with, told me to ask questions. And what that means is essentially, if you're stuck on something or you don't know where to go with something, say you have just one base idea, and it's like a girl who's a boxer. You ask, the best way if you're struggling with ideas is to just ask yourself questions. So why is she a boxer? What does she want to do with boxing? How long has she been boxing? And continue to get more detail-oriented questions as you go deeper. The most important thing with that is to not go with whatever the first answer to come into your head is. Because this is an old John Green quote, the guy that wrote Fault in Our Stars. He said, your first answer is your worst answer, because it is the one that everyone's brain goes to. Because essentially your mind pulls from every movie you've ever seen, every book you've ever read, and it just tries to fill in the quickest solution it possibly can. So if you sit on that and go with your second idea, your third idea, your fourth idea, you tend to come up with more ideas that are more you, and are more natural, and fit your story more. And also just the biggest part is they're ideas that are more creative. So I always like to, when Scott, he actually came up with the initial idea for Kindred Heaven. He watched the movie and then messaged me and said, I'll message you in 3 months with an idea. And then I got like a 4-page document. That was the entire story, essentially. And he was like, let's write this. So that was actually him. But typically we start with what we call a pitch, essentially like almost like we would pitch to publishers, but we're pitching it to each other. So he'll come up with a pitch, he'll pitch to me, and I'll come up with a pitch and pitch to him. And the way it works is typically it starts with a simple base idea. So again, it might be like a girl who wants to be a boxer, and that's the log line. That's the whole, like with the Panty Bear, it was basically as simple as a girl harnesses the power of underwear to fight evil plushies. That was the whole idea. And then we just build. And we just keep building on that until essentially you start with just the one line and you get a paragraph, and then you get a page, and then you get 2 pages. That's called the snowflake method, where essentially you continue to build upon and write. So it's like your first line is just like the basic plot. Your second line is a more detailed, it starts to look at everything a little bit more. If you do your page 1, it starts to go into characterization. If you do your 2 pages, you start to go into the world building. Methods like that, where you kind of constrict yourself and force yourself to look down like a narrow hallway, like very focused, I think are really important to starting to develop a story, especially if you already have a world.
Before I let Mark talk, we have another writer who's not at this panel, but he addressed your specific question about you have all this stuff in your head, and like from that, what do you use? He gave us a really good piece of advice. He said, you did all this research, that's all good, you have this wealth of information, but sometimes the reader doesn't want to know all that. They want to know the juicy part, not everything around it. And so one of the difficulties that we have as a creative team is we have all these ideas, and there's this kind of temptation to want to just stuff everything you have into it. But you can't do that, because some things, like for example, our main character's favorite color, there are things that are interesting because they only live in our brains. We know, for example, like what do our characters have for breakfast? What's their favorite color? What color socks are they wearing? But those are not crucial to the storyline. They're very superfluous details. And so we kind of have to think about that and cut back a lot in terms of those are things that the reader might think are interesting tidbits and trivia, but they're also not important for the overall arcing storyline.
Well, so for your original question, like we start with characters too, even before we have a story. So Carly here, Kamen America, she originated, Tim and I created her for a parody comic. It was just a one-shot comedy. And she was a parody of a Marvel character, and she was just supposed to be used as a one-and-done joke. But people liked her. They liked her redesign. They liked the silly name we gave her. And so we had basically this blank slate of a character, and we adapted her into Kamen America. We spun her off into an original series with the original plot, unrelated to the parody aspect. Like the Ninja Turtles started out that way. They were parodies of Daredevil, and Deadpool started out that way. It was a parody of Deathstroke. And then from there, we understood Carly's personality. We wrote out her origin, her bio, basically her source book information first, and we find that helps guide the story, because then once you know your character, you know, well, what's your character going to say, what are they going to do next, how will that further the plot along, how will they react to a situation. We had a character that we created, and it started, her name is Sylvia, and the original idea for her, just the pitch was that we wanted to, because it's an anime and manga send-up, was that we wanted one of those female characters that goes, oh, like that. And like, all right, well, what are we going to name her? What are we going to do with her? Why does she laugh like that? What's her relationship to Carly? Okay. And then as we built out that character more, like, oh, wouldn't it be fun if we had a gamer character? She loves video games. She's always playing PlayStation. Well, why does she love video games? Oh, well, she's rich. Maybe she didn't have a lot of friends when she was a kid. Why didn't she have a lot of friends? Well, maybe they felt awkward going to her big house. Like, okay, well, who played video games with her when she was a kid? Oh, maybe her dad played video games with her when they were a kid. And then you find out, like, that's her relationship with her father. And like, well, what happened to her father? We haven't introduced her dad yet. Maybe her dad's not there anymore. Like, how did that build her character? How did that build her relationship with Carly? What's their story arc together now, knowing all that we know about them? And just from that, it builds organically, and all of a sudden we have a whole storyline based on inter-character relations. We build other related characters to them who also build on the plot. And then just suddenly it's almost one of those situations where it feels like it writes itself. And it all just comes organically from starting with the character and then sort of working out from there.
I'm basically going to reiterate what a lot of these guys said very eloquently. I basically start with character as well. I think a lot of times people, when they're building their world, they have this super high resolution idea of all this stuff that's going on. But as Tim was saying, that's not germane to the story. Nobody cares about whatever's going on in Hawaii in the world that you came up with. So I like to go with universal questions. So the first book, Soulfinder, was why do bad things happen to good people? Anybody could relate to that immediately. Once you know that's the question that we're starting with, like, okay, and now I need to find ways to make my character, Father Patrick Redder, relatable to anybody. Yes, he is a Catholic priest. Yes, he is a veteran. But I need to find ways where people can see themselves in his life and then build off from there. So it's one of those things where it's like, yes, you want to have the world built, but you don't need to spend all day, every day going into the minutia of whatever it is. So for me, I try and focus on key points in the character's life where I need to know about his relationship with his father and maybe key things that happened to him when he was a young man, when he was a teenager, these sort of like milestones in anybody's life. And then, yeah, maybe his favorite food because it relates on some level to his personality or whatnot. But I've seen over and over again, it seems that a lot of people, they build out this giant world and then they forget about the character, and then they don't understand why no one cares about their character. It's because you didn't focus on the character. So I like to start very small and then build out from there.
It's the philosophy should be people want to read your comic because they want the story and they want to be entertained. You're the storyteller. You guide them. What they don't want is the information dump. If they wanted the information dump, they would either read a visual guide or an encyclopedia. But to kind of put the advice of all these people together, and let's use Soulfinder as an example. Bryce, for example, said that whenever you have this world that you're building, one thing that you might not want to do is you don't want that first answer that comes into your head to the question. Because as Scott was saying, sometimes you're influenced by all these things because we consume so many media, so much film, so much TV. So one thing that's interesting about Doug, it's a fun trivia fact, is with Soulfinder, which is about combat veteran exorcists, guess what's the one movie he has not seen? The Exorcist. And I was like, you never saw The Exorcist? And he was like, I want to, but I can't because I don't want to be influenced by what they do. I want to at least say that my book is 100% original. And to go over something that Mark said, when we were helping Doug with some of the scripting and some of the world, as we got closer to the finish line, I said, there's one thing missing. And the one thing missing is that there's something about his main character that seems almost two-dimensional. He is what you would expect. He's kind of like, a man of the cloth, but also like a veteran. He's kind of a hardline, go-getter, no-nonsense kind of guy. And so I asked Doug, I said, this is one of those moments where you take one of those little things, those factoids in your head, and you use it. So I said, Doug, what's his favorite food? And he was like, wait, what? And I said, no, what's his favorite food? And he said, tater tots. And I said, we're going to put that in the book. And it's a subliminal thing, because there's a scene in a diner where he's talking to someone, and they've kind of had a nerve-wracking experience, and he's just sitting there, and he's just like, going to town on tater tots. I actually learned that from that show Justified, because in Justified, Raylan, he's a very similar character in that he's kind of this Dirty Harry type character who's like shoot first, ask questions later. But whenever he has this situation where he's kind of in an awkward spot, he just likes ice cream, and he'll just like be driving down the street talking to the deputy, and he's just licking ice cream cones. And so that subliminally tells the audience, yeah, this guy's a tough guy, but he likes a kid's food. So you know he's not all bad because he likes something that's fairly accessible and mundane. And I think that element is there because when you read Soulfinder and you get to that point, it's in the reader's mind, even though they're not conscious about it. They're like, oh, he's kind of this tough guy, but he likes tater tots, which we can all agree is a good food to like. So again, it's these very subtle things where you have this repository of the world that you build in, but you're not going to dump it all at once. You're going to pluck and you're going to take parts of it to kind of add flavor to the story that you're telling. Oh, question, yes.
I kind of like on the flip side, what if I have, like I've got my characters, but I have like key moments in their story. I know how a very important thing is going to help them develop, but I don't know how to get to those moments. I don't know how to connect this moment to that moment with like mundane small events.
This is definitely a writer's question, so I'm going to defer to these guys.
Well, you see, Scott handles a lot of the structure